My parents raised a golden child who ruined his life. Betrayal, yet they demanded I bankroll his failed business. When I said no, they sued me for unjust enrichment. Imagine spending your entire life building yourself up from nothing, only to have the people who raised you try to tear it all down. Imagine waking up one day to find your own parents suing you, all to protect the golden child who wasted every opportunity. What if that wasn't even the worst of it? The quiet hum of my home office, usually a sanctuary of focused work, now feels like a ticking clock. It's a memory really from just a few years ago, when I was 23, a time I thought I was finally safe, finally established. But beneath the surface of my hard-won success, a storm was brewing, one that would redefine everything I knew about family. See, when I turned 18, I made this silent vow to myself. No one was going to save me. Not my parents, not some lucky break, not even some mythical mentor. It was just me, and that pledge, it shaped every single decision I made from then on. My parents, they barely noticed. To them, I was just Ethan, the quiet kid glued to his laptop, the one who apparently didn't get how the real world worked. Meanwhile, my older brother, Blake, he paraded around like he was born with a crown. His birthdays, practically coronations. Every single family dinner turned into a showcase of his genius. My folks, Robert and Susan, they clapped the loudest. My name's Ethan, I'm 26 now, but this story, it really kicked off a few years back when I was only 23. By then, I'd done it. I'd paid off every single one of my student loans. Every single one. I'd even bought my first house cash. Nothing fancy, just a small place in the suburbs. And my e-commerce business, I'd built it into something I was genuinely proud of. 6 figures in revenue, a small team of freelancers, the kind of independence most people my age only dreamed about. I wasn't flashy. I didn't post about it online. I just kept my head down and worked. Because I knew, deep down, the second I stopped to celebrate, someone would try to take it all away. Turns out, I was right. Growing up in our small town, everyone knew everyone else's business, especially if your last name was like ours. My dad, Robert, was the regional manager for a building supply company. He wore that title like a medal. My mom, Susan, she juggled part-time work with being Blake's full-time cheerleader. Blake, who's 3 years older than me, was always the golden boy. My parents used to joke he was born with a winning smile and a scholarship offer. It didn't matter that he'd flunked out of college, wrecked 2 cars, or maxed out Robert's credit card on an unplanned spring break. He's just finding himself, they'd say, shrugging it off. He's meant for great things. As for me, I was the invisible one, the backup plan that was never meant to be used. I remember one Thanksgiving dinner not long before everything absolutely blew up. We were at my parents' house, the turkey half carved, and Mom had already had a glass and a half of her boxed wine. Blake had just gotten back from trying to launch some business concept in Los Angeles. It ended exactly how you'd expect, him crashing on someone's couch begging to come home. My folks, they welcomed him back like he was a war hero returning from a long, arduous campaign. At dinner, Dad raised his glass. To new beginnings, he murmured, his eyes fixed on Blake. We know your next chapter is going to be a big one. Blake just grinned, clinked glasses. I said nothing. Nobody toasted me when I bought my house, you know. Nobody even mentioned it. They all knew. I'd told them months before, sent pictures, even offered to host. Crickets. But Blake shows up with 2 duffel bags and debt collectors on his tail, and suddenly he's the phoenix, rising from the ashes. I tried so hard not to let it get to me. I really did. I'd spent years building my business, mastering SEO, product sourcing, customer service. Every late night, every missed party, every tiny victory, I celebrated them in silence, alone in my apartment. I hoped that, finally, that would be enough to earn some respect. But I should have known better. In our house, effort didn't count. The outcome didn't matter. What mattered was image, charisma, drama, and Blake. He had all of that in spades. A week after Thanksgiving, my mom Susan called. Her tone was odd, stiff, almost rehearsed. She asked if I could come over to talk. I just figured it was about Blake. Maybe they wanted me to help him find a job or be a reference. I was used to being the silent fixer, the ghost behind the curtain. But when I got there, I could feel it. Something was wrong. My dad, Robert, was in his recliner, arms folded, TV muted. Blake was on the couch in sweatpants, looking smug, like he was in on some private joke. Mom, she just smiled nervously, the kind of smile she'd give right before saying something she knew would infuriate me. She gestured to the kitchen table. Why don't we sit down? I remember how slowly I moved. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken words. I sat. Mom took a deep breath. Then she said it. We were hoping you could assist Blake with a small investment. That word, investment, it hung in the air, a terrible odor. Like I was some angel investor they could charm into saving their sinking ship. I just blinked. What kind of investment? Blake leaned closer, a predatory glint in his eye. I've got this idea. It's like a subscription box service, but for tech gadgets. You know, like those mystery boxes. We could market it to college kids. Low overhead, high margins. I just stared at him, then at my parents. And you want me to fund it? My dad cleared his throat. Not quite fund it, Ethan. Just help him get started. You've had a wonderful run. You've done so well for yourself. It's time to pay it forward. Pay it forward. I felt a hot wave of disbelief. Like my 2 a.m. customer emails, my 12-hour workdays, my Raymond-fueled academic grind, it all meant nothing because I hadn't done it right. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely a whisper, trying desperately to keep it level. But I'm not in a position to just throw money at a vague idea with no business plan. Blake wrinkled his eyes. It's not vague. I've got contacts. I know people. You've been back here for 2 weeks. I shot back, living in the guest room. That was a mistake. I saw Mom's face stiffen. Dad leaned forward. Mom laid a hand on the table. Ethan, we're just asking you to help your brother. Family supports each other. I've supported myself since I was 18, I said, my voice rising now. That's how I was taught, right? They didn't answer. I just got up and left. I thought that would be the end of it. I expected the guilt trips, maybe a few passive-aggressive texts, before they moved on to their next scheme. That's how things had always worked. But I had no idea. I had no idea how truly dire things were about to get. I didn't realize how far my parents would go to protect their golden boy, because the next time I saw them, it was in court. But that's skipping ahead. There's so much more to tell. The quiet conflict, and it escalated into a full-fledged legal ambush. The treachery, the lies. When I finally realized my own parents were prepared to ruin me just to prop up the son who had never lifted a finger, I vowed right then and there, I was done turning the other cheek. They didn't knock. It was a Wednesday night, and I remember it like it was yesterday, because it was inventory night, the least glamorous but most crucial part of my business. Every week, I'd move boxes, scan, repack, prep orders. That night, I was ankle deep in mailing labels when I heard my front door open. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I live alone. Nobody had a spare key. Then, the unmistakable click of the lock sliding shut again, followed by a faint murmur of voices. 3, maybe 4, and one of them, definitely Blake. I rounded the corner fast, my heart doing gymnastics in my chest. What the? My parents, Robert and Susan, were standing in my foyer. Blake was behind them, a smirk playing on his lips, like he owned the place. My dad had this manila folder tucked under his arm, and that same self-righteous look he used to give me when he lectured me about my attitude as a kid. My mom offered me a tight-lipped smile, as if this were just a casual family visit, not a blatant break-in. How did you get in? I asked, my voice a stunned whisper. We used the key, Mom replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The emergency spare I'd given them years ago, when I still foolishly believed we had something resembling a healthy relationship. An open invitation, apparently, to just waltz in whenever. I stuck out my hand, give it back. Now, she paused, then dug it out of a handbag, dropping it into my palm like a child caught stealing. But it wasn't just that. It was the look in her eyes, not shame. Disappointment. In me. What are you doing here? I asked, suddenly feeling more wary than angry. Blake just shrugged, strolling into my living room like he owned the furniture. We tried being polite. You slammed the door in our faces. So now we're handling things the proper way. The proper way? I repeated, my brows furrowing. My dad set the packet down on my kitchen island, sliding it towards me. It's time we had a serious talk, Ethan, about what you owe this family. I didn't open the folder. Not yet. I was too busy trying to figure out if I was actually dreaming. You're in my house without permission, I said, my voice dangerously low. You have 4 seconds to explain why I shouldn't call the cops. Oh, please, Mom scoffed, as if I were being overdramatic. You're acting like a stranger. I wonder why. I shot back. Just read the paperwork, Dad replied, gesturing to the packet. I finally opened it. It didn't register right away. Legal language names, numbers, a suit filed in their names. Against me, fraudulent withholding of assets, misappropriation of family investment, unjust enrichment at the expense of sibling. I just stared at the words. What the hell is this? My voice broke, sharp and loud in the sudden silence of my home. Blake stepped forward, arms crossed. It's what you get when you lie about where the money came from. I didn't lie about anything. Oh, come on, he said, rolling his eyes. We all know you didn't build this business from scratch. You used the money Nana left, didn't you? My jaw actually dropped. Are you serious right now? He smiled. A cat that had just cornered a mouse. You'd think I didn't notice how you suddenly got real cozy with e-commerce the year Nana died. That's when your little side hustle blew up. Admit it, I didn't get a cent from Nana's estate. I managed to say, dumbfounded. She left everything to her. Yeah, and she always had a soft spot for you. My mother chimed in, gently, even when Blake was the one who needed help. So, let me get this straight, I began, slowly, carefully. You break into my house, throw false accusations at me, and what? You want me to admit to stealing money I never touched. We want what's fair, my father stated forcefully. Blake has been struggling. You've clearly been profiting. It's time to rebalance the scales. There it was, the mask was off. I'd anticipated deception, even guilt trips. But this, a lawsuit against their own son. It shattered something deep inside me. Years of being disregarded, spoken down to, treated as a supporting role in Blake's never-ending drama, it all boiled over at once. You want to rebalance the scales, I said, my voice trembling, rising. Let's talk about scales! Let's talk about the 2 cars you bought him before he was even 20. How you co-signed his loans, paid off his credit cards, allowed him to move back home every single time he failed. You gave him everything. And me, my voice cracked. I've never asked you for a penny because you were always so proud. Because I had to be, Mom snapped. I yelled, you never offered. You never believed in me. You never even asked about what I was building. And now that it's succeeded, you think I owe you? After a brief, charged silence, Blake mumbled, you wouldn't even have a future if it weren't for this family. My fists tightened. You mean the family that's suing me? My father took a step forward. You can prevent all of this, Ethan. If you just assist your brother in getting back on his feet, we can dismiss the claim. A clean slate. You mean, hand over my money so you don't ruin my reputation. He didn't respond. I snatched the folder and flung it back at the island. Get out! No! My mother looked like she wanted to argue. My father looked like he wanted to punch a wall. Blake didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away with that arrogant swagger, like he thought he'd won. But they hadn't. They just ignited a fire. The fallout began almost immediately. A letter from their lawyer arrived first, confirming they were actually going through with the claim. Then came the calls, from extended family, uncles, cousins, even old neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years, all checking in after hearing some things. The rumor mill was spinning at warp speed, and suddenly, I was the villain. I tried to stay focused, but it was impossible to ignore how poisoned everything felt. Every email notification felt like a subpoena. Every family text message felt like a trap. I stopped sleeping. I started checking my front door twice a night. Then, 2 weeks after the break-in, I received the email that truly confirmed my worst fears. It was from my bank. One of my primary business accounts had been frozen, pending an investigation related to a legal dispute. My heart actually stopped. My fingers trembled as I clicked through. I'd done nothing wrong. I'd paid every tax, kept meticulous records. But now I was being treated like a criminal because of their baseless claims. I called the bank. They were polite but firm. The freeze would remain in place until the claim was resolved in court. Blake had promised to make things fair. He was dragging me into the mud, and my parents were practically handing him the rope. I thought that would be the worst of it. But then I discovered something that truly made my blood run cold. Blake hadn't just filed a lawsuit. He'd filed a restraining order against me, claiming I'd threatened him. Claiming I was erratic, hostile, a danger to his safety. I stared at the copy in disbelief. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He was attempting to portray me as unstable, so the court would believe his story over mine. It was character assassination, plain and simple. A smear campaign, based on lies, and funded by the very people who used to tuck me in at night. That was the tipping point. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the lawsuit. It was about principle. About standing up to people who had used love as a leash and expected me to roll over and thank them for it. I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to apologize, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let them rewrite the story of my life. They wanted a war fine. I'd give them one, and the first shot would be fired at the one secret they thought I didn't know, the financial skeleton in their closet. The restraining order hearing was set for a Monday morning in early spring. The sun was out, but I barely noticed. I hadn't slept the night before. I was too wired, too angry, too focused on every worst-case scenario running through my head. My lawyer, a guy named Mark, who I found through a friend of a friend, assured me the case was weak. This isn't going anywhere, he'd said. Judges can smell fabricated drama a mile away. Still, I was shaking as I walked into that courthouse. I wasn't afraid of losing the restraining order case itself. I was afraid of what it meant that Blake was willing to go this far. That my parents were willing to swear under oath that I was violent, unstable, and a danger to my own brother. That they were coaching him on what to say. My parents sat behind Blake, acting as if he were the victim of some mafia vendetta. Their fingerprints were all over that document, even if their names weren't. Mom was even dabbing away fake tears. When the judge threw out the case 20 minutes in, citing insufficient evidence and a clear motive of financial retaliation, they were stunned. Blake even tried to speak again after the gavel dropped, as if he thought he could persuade the judge to change her mind. But that part was over. I wasn't relieved. Not really. I went home that day, sat on my living room floor, and stared at the unopened boxes of unscanned inventory stacked against the wall. Even though I'd technically won, I knew this wasn't over. The restraining order was just a distraction. A character hit piece designed to soften me up before the real lawsuit began. For the first time in years, I didn't want to work. I didn't want to fight. I just sat there in silence, feeling as if I'd lost something I couldn't even name. Over the next month, everything stalled. My business accounts remained partially frozen. I moved some operations to a backup account, but the damage was already done. My cash flow suffered, my ad budget dried up, my fulfillment timeline slowed, and some customers even backed out. One of my best-selling suppliers dropped me, citing reputational risk. I tried to explain, tried to fight through it, but the more I pushed, the more it felt like I was drowning in mud that someone else had poured on me. I was losing my footing, not just financially, but mentally. Then came the absolute worst blow. On a Thursday afternoon, my landlord for the warehouse space I rented, only 800 square feet, but it had become the beating heart of my operation, informed me that he wasn't renewing my lease. Too much legal noise, he said flatly. I have other tenants. I can't afford drama, I begged. I offered to pay 3 months in advance. He didn't budge. I hung up the phone and just stared at the wall. That was the moment. Rock bottom, not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet, cold, as if something inside me finally broke free and drifted away. I'd spent 3 years building something that worked, something honest, something truly mine. And in less than 2 months, the people who raised me had almost completely destroyed it. I could have folded. I even started drafting a letter to the court, agreeing to settle for some low amount, just enough to make them go away. But I didn't send it, because that night, I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Her name was Chloe, and she used to be my neighbor when we were kids. We'd played backyard tag, rode bikes through the cul-de-sac. We lost touch after she moved away in middle school. I hadn't thought of her in years, but there she was, messaging me on LinkedIn. Hey Ethan, she wrote. I noticed your name in a mutual post and did a double take. I remember you from back home. I'm sad to hear about the litigation. I just wanted to say, don't let them take everything you've achieved. You were always the clever and quiet one. But we all knew. I read that message several times. Not because it changed anything immediately, but because it reminded me of who I used to be. I got up that night, knowing they couldn't take away the part of me that knew how to build. I was the kid who used to sell homemade candles door to door and stayed up late watching coding videos on YouTube. I walked into the storage room, cleared off my whiteboard, and started again from scratch. Rebuild, rebrand, restart. I started small with only a few $100s in liquid cash, barely enough for a single Facebook ad run. So I went organic. Reddit, Instagram Reels, TikTok snippets. I rebranded my best, selling product under a different name, with a cleaner aesthetic and a more personal voice. I built a new Shopify store using a VPN and a Fresh Business LLC in another state. I stayed up until 2 a.m. every single night, making calls, writing copy, and learning more about web optimization in 2 weeks than I had in the previous year. And it began to work, slowly, quietly. But it worked. My DMs were flooded with customers asking where the old brand went and thanking me when I responded personally. One of them was a YouTuber who ended up featuring the product in a review. That review blew up. Orders tripled in a week. Meanwhile, the lawsuit stalled. My lawyer, Mark, filed a motion to dismiss, and their team tried to amend it. The judge pushed hearings back another month, and then another, giving me precious time to recover and prepare, because while they were busy spinning fairy tales about how I'd stolen Blake's future, I was busy collecting receipts. Not just business receipts, but family receipts. Tax records, which weren't easy to get, but they were very real. My Nana, before she passed away, had sent me a manila envelope of her own, back when she still lived alone. Blake had gotten a large payout, enough to pay off college loans, start a business, or buy a house, but he blew it. Gambling, bars, lavish trips, crypto scams, all gone within a year, and he knew it. My parents knew it too, but they never expected me to find out. I also discovered an old voicemail from Nana, left a few weeks before her death. Her voice was feeble, but clear. "I hope you're doing well, Ethan," she'd said. "I simply wanted to express that I am proud of you. I wish others saw what I see. Keep going, and don't let them shame you into helping those who have never attempted to rescue themselves." The tides were turning. But I didn't tell anyone. I stayed quiet. I kept building. I moved my entire operation into a friend's garage temporarily. He ran a coffee roasting business and let me use his back room for shipping. I played that message on repeat the night I had it transcribed for evidence. I became invisible for a while. I let them think I was losing, and I let them tell stories about how the truth was catching up with me. All the while, I was watching, waiting, preparing for the next phase, because the court date would come soon, and I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd dismantle everything they'd built, not out of vengeance, but because some people only learn when you stop letting them write your story and hand them a copy of the real one. And believe me, I was writing every single word. They had no idea. And that's what made it so incredibly satisfying. The documents from Nana's estate, the ones I discovered tucked inside that envelope she'd mailed me before she died, weren't just sentimental relics, they were a blueprint, a timeline, and a receipt. The kind of things my parents assumed would never see the light of day. After all, Blake had torched through that money before the ink on the check had even dried. Who would remember? Who would care? Well, I would. I scanned everything, highlighted key figures, the trust fund, the disbursement details, the undeniable that Blake had been given an $80,000 payout at age 22, under the condition that it be used for long-term growth and development. And my name? It was nowhere to be found. I hadn't received a single penny. The best part, Nana's handwritten message on the back of the final page. Just 6 words in her distinctive cursive scrolls. "Ethan doesn't need it. He builds." 6 words that shattered my parents' entire narrative. 6 words that exposed Blake's sob story for what it truly was: an inheritance wasted, not stolen, a future he set on fire. But I didn't go public with it yet. The case was still plodding along, and my parents' lawyer kept trying to push hearings back, which was perfectly fine with me. Every week that passed gave me more time to grow stronger, and then more rope to hang themselves with. While they delayed, I started digging even deeper. I reached out to an old neighbor, Eleanor, who used to live across from us growing up. She remembered everything, including the day Blake received that check, and the brand new car that appeared in our driveway a week later. People talk, especially when you're polite and quiet, Eleanor told me over tea, describing Nana's surprise, the parties, and the screaming matches between Blake and my father when the money inevitably ran out. Your Nana, she always thought he'd just spend it. She wasn't blind, you know. She just didn't want to upset your mother. I didn't even have to ask for a statement. She provided one. Words spread quickly, and soon I had a small file full of messages, texts, and even images. Blake in Vegas, champagne in hand. Blake on a boat, tagged in an old college friend's Instagram post, clutching a bottle of Grey Goose and flipping off the camera, all within 10 months of Nana's trust being paid out. It painted a picture that was loud, brash, and irrefutable. But that wasn't the only angle I was working. I had one more card to play, one that required some serious finesse. The first person I called was David, who used to be our family accountant back when my parents still filed their taxes correctly. I hadn't seen him in years, but he remembered me right away. "Ethan, you were the quiet one, right?" "The polite one." "I need a favor," I said. I wasn't sure he'd comply, but when I told him about the lawsuit, the restraining order, the ridiculous charges, he grew quiet. "Real quiet?" "They told me you stole from them," he said after a beat. "They said you were hiding something big." But I didn't believe it. Why not? "Because I did their taxes the year they got that trust distribution," he explained. "Susan told me it was for Blake's future, seed money for a tech business, and I recorded it as a gift transfer, precisely as she requested." "Are you prepared to put that in writing?" I inquired. A long silence followed. "I'll do better," he answered. "I've still got the files." He emailed them the next morning. So there it was. Proof from 3 separate angles. Nana's trust paperwork, eyewitness evidence, and tax records proving Blake got money he did not disclose during discovery. My lawyer, Mark, nearly fell out of his chair when I handed him the file. "They're cooked," Mark remarked, flicking through the pages. "And this is no longer merely a defense. This is counter-claim material." I just nodded. "That's the plan." But I didn't just want to win. I wanted to change the narrative. So I started laying out something else. Something more public. I rebuilt my brand under a new name, with a different domain, fresh visuals, everything. But this time, I focus on the story, not the lawsuit itself, just the broad strokes. Built from scratch, I said in the About page. Bootstrapped, no handouts. Every dollar earned the hard way. I never named names I didn't have to. People knew. Old customers returned, new ones followed. Word spread. Someone started a Reddit post about the rebrand, and it caught fire. "This is how you bounce back," one comment read. "This guy's work ethic is incredible." My email list quadrupled. Revenue recovered. I remained silent because I was still waiting for one more piece to fall into place. Blake's next move. It arrived sooner than expected. Mark called me one morning while I was packaging orders. "They filed an emergency motion to what? Freeze your personal assets. They say you're hiding money." I should have been enraged. Panicked, even. Instead, I grinned. Let them try. While they were playing checkers, intoxicated on wrath and entitlement, I was setting up the chessboard. Everything I had was now secured by a new LLC. Mark actually chuckled when he saw the paperwork. My property was transferred to a trust. My car was leased via the firm. My savings were split between 2 accounts under different holding companies. "You've been busy," he said. "They taught me well," I told him. Never trust anyone. Not even family. We opposed their motion with everything. The tax records, the trust documents, the full timeline, Eleanor's letter, David's statement. A complete audit trail of my business's growth. From the day I started selling phone accessories out of my dorm room to the day I bought my house. It was surgical. It was devastating. But I wasn't done. Here's the thing about people like Blake and my parents. They don't just want money. They want control. The ability to shape the story and to say, "You owe us," and have everyone believe it. So, I planned one final move. Something public. Something permanent. I scheduled a small podcast interview with a fellow entrepreneur I'd met years ago. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral. But it was honest. For an hour, I told my story. Not the lawsuit. Not the revenge. But the real story about growing up in the shadow of someone who could do no wrong. About building a business at night while the rest of my family laughed at me. About paying off student loans with side hustle money. And about the quiet power of being underestimated. Sometimes, I explained, the toughest part isn't starting from scratch. It's starting from behind, when the people who should have helped you are the ones who hold you back. The show aired a week later, and the response was overwhelming. DMs, emails, comments from strangers who said they recognized themselves in my remarks. People who had been cut down by their own families, who had had to battle for every inch. But more than that, people started asking questions about the litigation. Questions my parents were absolutely not prepared to answer. Their lawyer called Mark in a panic. "We'd like to revisit settlement discussions," he told him. "We're not interested," Mark said, without even consulting me, because it was too late. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was setting the terms. The next hearing was fast approaching, and I was prepared, not just with evidence, not just with allies, but with the unshakable truth that no matter how many times they tried to rewrite my story, I still held the pen. And soon, I'd use it to end theirs. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Not physically, but in that sterile, stiff kind of cold that crawls up your spine when you know something irreversible is about to happen. The walls were beige, the lighting fluorescent, and there was no dramatic music, just the hum of tension as everyone took their seats. It had been 8 grueling months since they first filed that lawsuit. 8 months since my parents and my golden child brother, Blake, decided I owed them the life he had squandered. 8 months of venomous texts, weaponized family gossip, and pathetic attempts to destroy everything I'd built on my own since I was 18 years old. And now, it was time. Blake sat next to their attorney, looking uncomfortable in a wrinkled suit he clearly didn't know how to wear, chewing the inside of his cheek like he was trying to disappear into his seat. My parents sat behind him, both dressed like they were attending a church fundraiser. Mom in pearls and pastels, Dad stiff in a blazer that didn't quite fit around his stomach anymore. They refused to look at me. My lawyer, Mark, shuffled papers beside me. I was nervous, yes, but it was a strange, quiet calm. The kind you only get when you've spent months preparing for a moment with such surgical precision. There was nothing left to panic about. Everything had already been set in motion. Mark leaned over and whispered, "This is going to be fun." The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s, called everyone to order. The hearing began with their lawyer laying out the same tired argument that I had unfairly benefited from family resources, that I'd misled my parents into believing I was self-made and that Blake's life had been derailed because I hoarded financial assets that should have been shared. The remarks sounded desperate, empty. And then, suddenly, it was our turn. Mark stepped up. No theatrics, no yelling, just facts. Your Honor, he started, his voice clear and concise, we will demonstrate 3 things. First, my client, Ethan, did not receive any financial support or inheritance from his family. Second, the plaintiff's son, Blake, acquired $80,000 from a family trust and spent it foolishly. And third, that this lawsuit is a malicious attempt to extract funds from my client under false pretenses, after that the plaintiffs failed to control their own finances or their son. He then laid out the file. Exhibit A, he continued, holding up the documents. Nana's trust paperwork. It plainly states that the money was for Blake and only Blake. My client's name is not mentioned. Exhibit B, the notarized letter from David, their former accountant, confirming he filed that gift as a trust distribution with explicit instructions from my mother, Susan. Exhibit C, he paused, displaying a detailed timeline, shows a meticulous record of Blake's social media posts, travel logs, and online purchases. Everything from designer footwear to bottle service in Miami coincides perfectly with the 10-month period following that trust payout. He took a breath. And Exhibit D, Your Honor, is a recorded voicemail from Nana herself, verified and transcribed, in which she states unequivocally, Ethan doesn't need it. He builds. My parents' lawyer attempted to object, but the judge simply overruled and the facts remained unchanged. Then, for the final blow, Mark took out the spreadsheet. Your Honor, we've also prepared a comprehensive report detailing my client's company development over the last 4 years. Everything is provable, from his dorm room operation to his first product launch and Shopify sales records. Every invoice, every tax return. There's no missing money or concealed assets here. Just a young man who worked hard and succeeded without assistance. He took a deliberate pause. Meanwhile, we have undeniable evidence that the plaintiffs and their son have consistently misrepresented their financial situation to multiple parties, including their mortgage lender. And indeed, this very court, the judge arched an eyebrow. Mark allowed himself a small, knowing smirk. That's why we're also filing a counterclaim for defamation, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress. I will never forget what happened next. The judge leaned back in her chair, removed her glasses, and looked directly at my parents. I've presided over a lot of family cases, she said, her voice calm but cold, but this is one of the more cynical attempts I've seen to weaponize the legal system against a relative for personal gain. Based on the facts presented, I'm dismissing all allegations against Mr. Ethan with prejudice. Boom. Done. But she wasn't finished. As for the counterclaim, she continued, locking eyes with Robert. Mr. Ethan is well within his rights to seek compensation, and frankly, I think he has a case. My mother blinked rapidly, her hands fiddling with her wedding ring. Their lawyer's face went pale. Blake sat there, paralyzed, like a deer caught in headlights. My father's face flushed crimson with a mixture of wrath and shame, but none of them said a word. We walked out in silence. Once we were in the hallway, Mark turned to me. They'll settle, Ethan. Trust me. They can't afford not to. And they did. 2 weeks later, their lawyer contacted us with an offer. They would pay all of my legal fees, issue a written apology drafted by us, and waive any future legal action if I dropped the counterclaim. I didn't agree right away because I needed one more thing. The truth. I wanted that apology published, not buried in a private letter or hidden behind legal jargon. I made a formal statement on my company's website, shared it in an open letter on LinkedIn, and even featured it in the same small podcast that had sparked the first wave of support. I didn't want money from them, but I did want accountability. The day the message went up, I received over 150 emails from strangers, acquaintances, former students, even a few old instructors, all expressing the same thing: thank you for telling the truth. Blake vanished from social media, and word circulated that he had left town, maybe to live with a cousin 2 states away. His name became something whispered in our village, not with adoration, but with humiliation. My parents also lost the majority of their close network. Eleanor told me they'd stopped attending church entirely. There were no more neighborhood BBQs, no more faking it. People who used to chat with them were now crossing the street to avoid them. They didn't just lose the case, they lost the story. Because I recovered it. In the months that followed, my company doubled in size. I added 2 new product lines, hired a small crew, and started a mentorship program for underprivileged students looking to start their own businesses. I called it the Builders Fund. I knew Nana would have appreciated that. Could I forgive them one day? Maybe. But not yet, because forgiveness is earned. And they never even tried. They believed they could steal what I created, not realizing that I am what I created. This whole experience, it taught me that family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's the people who stand by you, who believe in your grind, even when your own flesh and blood tries to burn it all down. It taught me that my secret pledge at 18, it was more vital than I ever knew. So, here's my question for you. Have you ever had to fight for your truth, especially against those who were supposed to protect it? If you've been underestimated or betrayed by family, what was your turning point? What made you decide to fight back? Share your story or your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.